Hi there, I'm Jane Deerwester with McIntyre Elder Law, and I am so pleased and excited to introduce y'all to my friend and realtor extraordinaire, Jason Brodsky from Owners Only Real Estate, who's joining us for our Elder Law report today. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Jane. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yes. Our pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Jason and I know each other and have worked together on lots of real estate transactions. And really the focus of our talk here today is about how hiring professionals to protect and preserve and sell your real property is so important in regard to the elder law sphere, but really all around, right? Hire a professional to do a professional job, I always say.
Absolutely.
And yeah, Jason, you mentioned something at the beginning about the number of real estate agents we have in Western North Carolina. And you just said something that just hit so on point about, yeah, we've got a lot of people to choose from, but you really want to choose a quality person. So can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think that's so important for our listeners to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you. So what we're referring to is the fact that there in Western North Carolina, the Asheville area, there are literally thousands of agents in the greater Western North Carolina. You know, the greater Asheville area encompasses Hendersonville, Waynesville, I would say, just, an hour radius around this area. And real estate's very popular here. There's a lot of people who've gotten into it because the bar of entry is not entirely that high. And that's a good and a bad thing. And you as a consumer, you don't know if that person whose card you picked up, if they have the integrity that matches yours, the experience that you expect. And so one of the sayings we've come up with from observation is there's no shortage at all of real estate agents, but there's a shortage of real estate professionals. And it is critical that when you are talking to somebody and getting advice on maybe the largest asset in your life and how to transact it, that you get the best advice you possibly can, or the financial, emotional time repercussions can be quite significant.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I know people have been asking me, and the first topic we're going to talk about here with regard to real estate, specifically here in Western North Carolina, and I think this probably goes across the state, is the shift in the market. This is something, even though we're elder law attorneys, I think our listeners know my background is in real estate, and I also have my real estate license, but there's definitely a shift going on in the market. So I was hoping, Jason, you could talk about, from your experience right now in Western North Carolina, what kind of shift are you seeing and what elements are playing into that shift?
Certainly. So when you hear the news and they say, we're in a buyer's market or we're in a seller's market, let me put something out there, some food for thought. There's no such thing as a bad market, right? There's a market that favors buyers and favors sellers, and it just depends, do you need to buy or sell? So how economists determine the state of the market, is it a buyers or sellers, is by looking at what we would call the absorption rate. And the absorption rate means if no more properties come on the market at the current pace of sales, what would it take in time to get to zero, to deplete the inventory? Anything below 6 months of inventory is a buyer's market, and anything above tends to be I got that backwards. Anything below 6 months is generally a seller's market, above is a buyer's market. Well, a year ago at this time, we were at about 3.7 months of inventory. This time last year, this year, we are at 6.2. So we're solidly into a buyer's market. And we're in a buyer's market for, I think, a lot of reasons. Number one is just the influx of inventory, be it properties that are being sold because people don't want to manage, let's say, an Airbnb since there has been a hit in tourism, or new construction that we see everywhere that we drive around. So wherever that inventory is coming from, it is definitely coming. The other reason we're seeing some stagnation in the market is we see a lot of what we would call rate hostages. You refinanced your home during COVID, you've got a 2.3% rate. You're not refinancing to a 6.8% rate, to the point where you might live in this property that no longer works for you at all, but you don't really have another option. So rates still being perceived high, the amount of inventory coming on the market, and these rate hostages who would be buyers if they could sell their property. All of that has configured to a market that's seeing maybe some stagflation right now. It's unique.
It is. It is. Thank you for that, and kind of boiling that down into really a pretty quick rundown. I tend to agree, and that's kind of what I'm hearing in my realms and chat rooms and those talking about the real estate market here. And just again, to bring it around to estate planning, the way that elder law attorneys, estate planning attorneys like myself and our attorneys here at McIntyre Elder Law work with real estate professionals. Often we have people who are transitioning into long-term care, or maybe have just lost somebody in their family and are left with a property or two. They're trying to, through the grief, get their bearings to determine, number one, what is this property worth? And so, as we know, this is a DIY world, or some people like to think it's a DIY world. So people just go to Google, they go to Zillow. They feel like with those resources that they know what the property's worth and they can do this themselves. However, I disagree. I'm curious what you think, Jason, of having professionals involved to help people understand what their property is worth. So we as attorneys will reach out to real estate professionals to provide broker price opinion, or the shortcut acronym is BPO, or a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis. These are different than an appraisal. An appraiser is another professional that is a higher level, but a higher level of investigation, scrutiny on the value of a property. But as real estate agents, we can do comparison and pull some comparative recent sales to help inform clients, friends about what the valuations are. So can you speak to, your process, or maybe some examples that you've seen in helping people determine, even as a listing agent, to determine what the true value of the property is, not maybe what they think in their head or what they want it to be, but what the actual value, what the market bears as the value of that property?
Certainly. So that's a really good topic to speak on, because it all starts with basic free market mechanics of supply and demand, right? And I think one of the hardest things for sellers to get their mind around is that the real estate market moves as fast as the stock market. Meaning, if you bought, a company listed on NASDAQ for $100 today, and tomorrow it's worth 110, that's clear. You could say, I can sell this for 110. Or it goes down to 70 and you want to sell it, it's clear it's going to go to 70. We don't have a problem getting our mind around that. It's pretty intrinsic, it seems. But when you talk to somebody about their real property, their real estate, and they watched, they built the home with their teenagers, and they watched their grandkids walk across the floor and take their first steps right there. There's a lot of sentimentality. Maybe it was built on old family land, which is common around Western North Carolina.
Very common.
Buyer perspective is price per square foot. Does this offer the amenities that the other similar properties offer? And is it a good value for me? So when we talk about comparables, I think it's important to note that unless you're in a manufactured home community or a condominium, there's not an exact replica for your property. But what there is the property that is either on the market as our competition, that is under contract that gives us some good information, or that has sold that is similar to your property enough that your property would have attracted those buyers. So we want to look at the current inventory, our competition, what's under contract as an indicator of what yours might be worth, but most importantly, what has closed, because that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the buyer and seller came to a meeting of the minds on value. Value, of course, is different than price. So when we look at this information, what we do to inform our clients is help them understand North Carolina's really unique real estate contract, and I call it double-edged. We do not have contingencies in this state. That word effectively does not exist in the North Carolina real estate contract, absent custom drafting and forms. But the boilerplate terminology in North Carolina allows for the buyer and seller to agree on a fee known as a due diligence fee. Some of you might consider it to be an option fee in some states or commercial contracts. But what that money does, it is given to the seller upon the formation of contract, and it buys the buyer the unilateral right to walk away from the deal. And it is critical to understand the import of that, because the average seller who does not know or think this through or get the advocacy on the front end, I would say that we advocate for our clients well in advance of them even hiring us by explaining this before we sign an agreement.
Mhm.
It's so critical that they know who they are getting into business with on the consumer side, on the buyer side, because a buyer can tie up a seller's property for weeks. Now,
And don't I know it? Because I
yeah,
do it for a living.
yeah,
I do that in litigation for a living quite
right.
often.
And so how this ties into the market moving as quick as the stock market, right, is if you have a buyer go under contract for a property and they're not a solid buyer, or they make all of these demands of you, and you as the seller say, I don't want to do this, I don't think this is fair, this isn't what we negotiated, I want to kick you out of the deal, buyer, and go find another buyer. Guess what? As a seller, you cannot do that. So it's critical to understand that in this state where you have a contract where the buyer has all the leverage on the outset, at owners only real estate, one of our first orders of business is to help our clients, one, become objective, to get away from, to separate the emotional component from, look, little Johnny took a first steps, or it's beautiful. I know this is your grandfather's land, and we respect that, and we're going to communicate that to the buyer. And we need to help you understand the true value, where we should position this in the marketplace, so that ultimately we can have you engage with multiple buyers simultaneously and be able to allow you to choose the best of several competing offers, so that we can, I don't like to use the word guarantee so much when real estate or when there's humans involved, but we can come pretty darn close to guaranteeing you're going to close on time, you're going to have a smooth transaction, and more importantly, you're not going to find yourself with your back against the wall making concessions that you never had to make.
I really like, Jason, that you're going back to talk about the contract. And I just want to point out, I bought a house in 2022, and even though I'm an attorney, I used to be a closing attorney. I have decades of experience as a real estate attorney, and I have my real estate's license. I still hired an agent to a professional
Yeah.
to represent me, because you want to have that level of separation, and my agent's looking at it through another lens. And I just feel like we need to have, I think we do have enough content to maybe create a series on real estate. And I'm curious what our listeners might think. And again, there are so many aspects to working with real estate and legal professionals when you're dealing with real property. I think we've only scratched the surface of those. Some other topics that Jason and I discussed before we got on the meeting here were issues surrounding listing and selling of property where there are several heirs, other services when we're dealing with the aging community, people transitioning to long-term care, that they may need to either renovate or upfit their property to work with a transition in mobility. Or Jason was even sharing with me, he had client that kind of had some life transitions that happened where he could only live in the basement of his property. He just wasn't mobile enough to walk around. And so we see all kinds of situations where, again, professionals like Jason and I can come in, really provide incredible value to clients and help and support. People are at times can be moving through all kinds of emotions, can be moving through grief or worry, frustration, and having compassionate, intelligent professionals surrounding you and your family. I just can't highlight enough how important I think it is. And like I said, Jason, I think we could go on and on about this topic, but I want to give you an opportunity, just some final thoughts before we wrap up today. And then again, maybe we'll make a couple more of these to fill in the blanks on some of the other issues that we've been discussing.
I would love that. Yeah. Well, I think, what I'd like to end with, I think, is because this is something I speak about every day. I'm so fascinated by markets, right? And what we've done at Owners Only. So a quick example of how we work is I'll just give you a real world one. So we just sold a property the other day for a woman who was not, she's in her 40s, but she had lost her husband and wanted to go back to Miami. And we valued her property at around 730, 750, but we priced it with the data that we have. We don't pull these numbers out of thin air. We did enough market research to understand that were we to price it just below 700, we would accomplish a few things. We would get her out on the time frame she wanted. We would get her absolute top dollar, and we would able to be adhering to the as is sale, so she didn't have to make repairs, and the property is in very good shape. We listed it for $697. We had it under contract for $765 cash in under a week.
Oh, bravo. And love it.
Because she also needed to still move and get some things done, we helped her negotiate. It was very easy because of the way that we set this up in the first place with competing buyers. We got the buyer to agree to give her 3 weeks of seller possession after close, and it was wonderful. It removed all the stress for her. It made it easy for her to solidify her housing details in Florida. But point is, we were able to get her top dollar quickly. But why I wanted to bring that up is every day I'm up against other agents, and I'll go into a meeting after they did, and I'll tell them, the seller, what I think. And they'll say, well, that agent told me we could get this price. And here's what I would say to anybody. They've got a better crystal ball than I do, because we don't know what somebody will close a property at. Nobody does. Right. What we've created a science out of is helping quantify where we need to hit the market at, because price and value are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. So our intention is to position your property in the marketplace at the right price so that you get all of the value. The inverse of this, which we don't do, is when a property goes on the market at a price that is not reflecting the value, and ultimately what happens there is a major loss of equity, because as the buyers watch it drop, eventually they will know the price, but I can promise you it is less than the value had that property been priced correctly in the first place. More than happy to explain this in detail on an individual basis to any clients or anybody that would just like to see what their property is, what we project it to be worth, what we would price it at in order to help you maximize the equity that you have.
Yes. Thank you so much. Jason Brodsky, Owners Only Real Estate. He is one of my go-to real estate people and a friend, and I so much appreciate you taking time to be here today. We're going to link all of the contact information for Jason in this talk, so that everybody can check in with him, check out his website if you're curious. And again, let us know if we need to do part 2, 3, 4. We'd be happy to do so. McIntyre Elder Law, as y'all know, I'm based in our Hendersonville office. We also have offices in Shelby and Charlotte. And so please check in with us when you need to evaluate protection of your real estate and what you want to happen to your real estate after you're gone. There are easy ways to avoid probate, and that's what we're here to do. We love working with professionals like Jason to really give you this overall professional experience on all sides. So thanks again, Jason, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Jane. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to our next one.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care.
Bye-bye.